This first letter is from a mother who says, I bought my 13-year-old daughter some shorts. That was probably your first mistake, buying them for her. But we'll keep reading. But she complained that they felt too baggy. We already know that that's not really the case. It's not about how they feel. She said, the mother says, they look great, so I don't get it. She says she wants them smaller and shorter because heaven knows really, really small shorts are much more comfortable. It's like kids think their parents are so stupid. She wants them smaller and shorter, but I think that they just don't look right. Well, it's really simple. She's trying to convince you in a subtle way that it's about how they feel on her, rather than saying, all the kids at my school, all the girls my age dress immodestly, and I want to dress immodestly too. Keep in mind, I don't care how anybody's kids dress. My kids are all old and getting somewhat baggy themselves, so I don't care. But the shorter the skirt, the shorter the shorts, it becomes more immodest. There's just simply more skin. And young girls do not understand. In fact, I've been flabbergasted at how older girls do not understand the effect that the way they dress has on boys. They really don't. So every parent listening, you really got to get this. When you tell your girls, well, you can't wear that when you go out, you can't assume that that's a teaching moment, because they really don't understand what you're talking about. The girls call it cute. So a girl shows up at an event and she's wearing short skirts with an inseam that I call just the seam, meaning 0 inches of inseam, low-cut blouse, tight-fitting clothes, and the other girls go, oh, don't you just look cute? And they mean it in their defense. They really do think it looks cute. The boys, I promise you, the boys over in the corner of the room, because I was actually once a boy, and I listen to the boys as they talk about the girls, because they talk more freely when I'm around than when the girls' mothers are. The boys don't say, oh, isn't she cute? They use expressions, not one of which I can think of I could use on the video chat. No kidding, not one of them. They see it only as sexual, because that's how the girls dress. It's a sexual way of dressing. That's not a path you want her to head down. You really don't. The mother says, I worry about the attention that she will get, you think, and the judgment that I will get, and she will grow out of them too fast. You're still missing the point, honey. If you even bring up baggy, whether they fit or she'll grow out of them too fast, you're going to lose. You'll be changing the subject. That's not the point. And you say, and they're not compatible with the standards of our church or of real love. Up to you how you deal with it, but as long as she lives with you, you get to say what she wears out of your house. Too bad what she says about what she's wearing. Just for fun, ask her why she wants her shorts shorter than that. I've gone through this with my girls, so I really kind of already know the results. No, really, ask her why. She can't give you a reason. So that, let's see, the skin of her upper thigh will breathe more easily? No reason at all makes any sense. It will turn out that there's no reason except that her friends wear short shorts. Feel baggy? Some of these reasons are hysterical. What's funnier is that we parents buy them. So, in other words, if they're too baggy, then maybe when she does handstands on top of an acrobatic biplane, maybe her shorts will flap around and cause abrasions to her legs. Has nothing to do with baggy. They're just immodest. Her girlfriends think they're cute. The guys think she's hot, but it advertises her as being immoral or slutty or whatever word you want to use. I would just stick with that explanation. My first line of defense would not be to mention church, because then all you're going to get is her rolling her eyes. I certainly wouldn't mention that that in the latest Real Love video chat you saw, it was recommended that she wear baggier shorts. It'll just annoy her. So just tell her it's all about the sex, and she has no clue where it goes after that. I get to interview these girls 10 years later when their lives have been ruined by sex, by attracting men with sexual attention, and these girls have no clue what that's like once their lives have been ruined in that way. You continue, not sure how to teach her and not just control her, or what's okay. I'm sure she wants to fit in with her friends, and she's starting to notice how a few older girls that she looks up to dress. And I get it, but it's just back to sex again. And just because it's common doesn't make it right. There have been in the history of the United States families that Ma Barker, anybody who's listening, if they're old enough to know who I'm talking about, you're way too old. Ma Barker and her sons used to rob banks together. So if you do it together, it must be okay. No. This is from a teacher who says, I've been having some real problems with one of my kids in class. So have other teachers. Yesterday I had an IEP meeting. I assume that means probably individual educational plan would be my guess, at school. It's always a big deal to have one of these meetings with the involvement of the parents, the teachers, and the principal, and you can bet that if there's an individual educational plan, that means the kid's having some trouble. And since the dad of the boy had been attacking me and other teachers by way of email, there was a lot of tension going into this meeting. So I was thinking, how can I do this differently? And then I remembered this. What does everybody in the meeting need? Well, love, of course. So I just went into the meeting knowing that everyone in the meeting, principal, teachers, the boy, their parents, needed to feel cared about. They needed to feel listened to. I needed to look into their eyes and let them know that I cared about what they were saying. And guess what happened? I was completely relaxed. So those of you who are listening, pay attention to the first result. The first result of being loving is that you will feel relaxed. You won't feel afraid. Prior to real love, she says, I would have been anxious, defensive, and needing everybody in the room to like me. What a huge difference. The other cool thing, separate thing, was that I could read everybody in the meeting like a book. And then I could adjust my conversation so that the meeting could go smoothly. After the meeting, I just had a great sense of joy and gratitude. Real love won't always get you the results you want. Some people are so frightened and angry and hateful and determined to be right that nothing reaches them. But real love is usually the only thing that will get you the results that you're looking for. And everything on earth goes better with real love. Nothing goes better with fear. This is from a man who's addicted to porn, women, video games, leisure pursuits. The guy lives for pleasure. And I helped him come up with a plan for being more productive rather than just numbing his pain. He's a professional, in fact. And I asked him how he was doing one day. And he said, I'm actually doing pretty well. It's been enjoyable to be more productive. he had actually done what I suggested. How delightful for you. I mean it. It's no small thing to discover the inherent fulfillment in accomplishing things. Not the imitation love of praise, just the sense of fulfillment that comes from doing things well. All our lives we were taught that if we worked hard, we would be worthwhile. No, not true. God would love us more. No. Everybody around us would like us more. Some people will. We'll make more money, and on and on and on. And so we did the right things for all these external reasons. But the real reward is from the satisfaction and the confidence that come simply from working, from doing well, from doing good in the world. Love is unconditional, but confidence and satisfaction are not. You have to actually earn those. He continues, I find that I enjoy life more and I feel more excited when I'm studying, interacting with people, and staying away from porn and the other things that I've been addicted to for so long. This is great stuff. When the rewards of meaningful life are greater than the rewards of porn or drinking or whatever the addiction is, that is when we stay away from the harmful things. Just being told they're harmful, just knowing they're bad, is not enough. Having a preacher at the head of the church pounding his fist on the Bible and telling us we're going to go to hell if we do bad things has been pretty well proven to be ineffective. We have to have somebody to replace those behaviors. And you have found some of those things, and it's been enjoyable for you. You say, I've been communicating more with my wife throughout the day and trying to think about her more when I am tempted to draw my thoughts elsewhere. I've been going to bed a little earlier and setting goals for each day of what I want to accomplish. I don't always meet my goals, but it's fun to meet some of them. Bless your heart, and what an example you are. It's in the doing and in the becoming that we find the joy, not necessarily in the completion of everything. You say, right now, most of my focus is on completing this one particular graduate course, but I'm also watching Real Love video chats, I'm reading the Bible, some other books. I've actually done more reading in the last 2 weeks than I have in many months. I'm enjoying myself, and I'm thrilled for you. You're finding lasting motivations to do right things. You continue. Life isn't perfect, and I can still be better, but I really have had an enjoyable several days. I feel like this is the way I want to live. And as I think that, it only seems to keep getting better. He then describes some changes that he was beginning to make with his children, like, I need to be more part of their lives and so on. You might not see miraculous changes in the beginning, just like you didn't see miraculous changes in the beginning of your doing more productive things. But your kids are dying for your love. So it will make a difference. And this will provide you with yet another reason to do things other than to engage in your old addictive behaviors. So each little step doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it was actually Chairman Mao who said 1,000-mile journey is composed of 1,000,000 little steps, or something to that effect. So it's amazing what you're doing. Sylvie's story. The other day, Bruce yelled from the other room, "Mom, Sylvie hit me." This is her mother writing. And then I heard Sylvie shout, "Only because he hit me first." After a little pause, they called out, "Never mind, we've apologized to each other, don't worry about it." If only adults would realize the foolishness of their selfishness, like these two little kids who were, how old?
5 and 4.
5 and 4. Maybe I should send this to the Israelis and the Palestinians. I know a couple that's dating, and sometimes he offers suggestions unsolicited about how she could run her business. When I say dating, they're living together, so they're either engaged or about to be. I sort of lose track sometimes of where people are. She says, I would prefer if Jack asked me when he wants to talk about this subject, the way I run my business, rather than just bringing it up. I don't do well with this sort of thing when I'm tired, for example. Or is this me defending myself? You can't really control when he brings things up as a pattern. We've talked about this before. When you say to somebody, I wish you would be more blank. I wish you would do less this. I wish you would only bring things up like this on Tuesdays and alternate Thursdays after 7 o'clock. If you make too many what I call pattern requests, people they start to feel really controlled and paralyzed. On any given day, they wonder which rule they're breaking. It requires that the other person remember what you like or don't like every time they speak. Requires them almost to be a different person. But if he brings up difficult subjects when you are tired, which only you can know, instead of asking him to read your mind, you can choose to say that you would prefer to talk about that subject the next day or whenever. And you don't always have to say why. I'm tired, or sometimes you can just say, it's good practice to tell people I would prefer to do this tomorrow without providing a reason. Because when we provide reasons, we tend to justify ourselves. We tend to justify our existence. She said, this is stuff from my past, isn't it? The feeling of never being enough, do more, getting disapproval. I hate it and I want it gone. I have not been good about telling Jack when to just zip it and when not to talk to me about this stuff, to tell him when I can't hear something and then I resent it. So then I feel like a victim. You use an important phrase here that almost everybody who is listening can benefit from, and that is that you hate it, that you hate this business of the past coming up and biting you, the past episodes of disapproval, of never being enough and having to do more. It is a waste of time. I hear every single day that I talk to people, I hear somebody say, I hate it that I do this, and then they name some flaw. It's a waste of time to hate something. The more you hate it, the more you fight it, the more attention you give to it, and you actually make it bigger. Just be aware of it. Be aware that in the past you've been told that you're not good enough, and be aware of the truths that you've learned lately, that you are enough, that there are people who love you regardless of how many mistakes you make. And yes, it's just old wounds that he is, without intending to, poking. His suggestions are nothing if you're not already wounded, which proves that it's old wounds. And it's brilliant that you're seeing this. Now you can do something about it. It comes back to no fear. Never be afraid of how somebody is going to react to what you do. It'll paralyze you. It's the only way to discover entirely who you really are. To not be afraid of how other people react. As soon as you're afraid, you will alter your behavior and you won't be yourself. And now you never get to find out what it's like to be yourself. She said, I'm going to memorize this. Memorize, what she just said about learning about not being a victim. Victims tend to rule the world. And it's important that you see that you cannot avoid all victims. It's important that you understand what I just said about you're learning who you are. In fact, that's why she said, I'm going to memorize this, which she said that about my saying, discovering who you are. I was at a large seminar some time ago, and there were, I don't know, 200 plus people in the room. And I tend, and many of you have seen this, I tend as I'm speaking to wander around in the audience, and I tend to touch people a lot. I don't do it intentionally, I just do, can't help myself. And I could see that there was one guy in the back of the room who was upset about something. I mean, upset to the point where he was literally jumping up and walking around in the back of the room like a paranoid schizophrenic about to pull a gun. He was really getting anxious. He went over and he talked to the event leaders, the two event leaders, and succeeded in making them upset as well. So when we got to the break, the two event leaders came to me and said, "We need to talk." Okay. So we went into the back room, I guess where the beatings are administered, and she said, "We can't have you touching people. It's just too upsetting to the people in the room. We've had complaints." Now, if you're afraid of people's disapproval, that would just freeze you. You wouldn't know what to say next. But I already know who I am. I know what I do. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. And I said, the truth is not that. The truth is you've had one complaint, not complaints from multiple people, and you're simply terrified of ever displeasing anybody because their disapproval frightens you personally, and you're afraid that they will take other people as they leave your congregation. Understandable, but this doesn't frighten me. So really only two people disapprove of what I'm doing. The man who's pacing in the back of the room and you. Just two. 2 out of 250. Pretty good rate of disapproval. If you can only get 1% of people who disapprove of what you're doing, you're probably doing the right thing. She repeated herself. She said, "We need you to stop touching people." I said, "I understand your fears completely. And I have to weigh the fears of one paranoid schizophrenic, because I happen to know who he was, and he is a paranoid schizophrenic, and you against the obvious delight of 200 plus other people who are finding all of this very helpful and very revelatory, so that they can see what loving looks like without fear." She repeated again, "Well, we need you to stop." Okay, so I've heard you and you're not hearing me. So I can say back to you exactly what you just said to me, which I did, but you're not hearing me because you can't say to me what I'm saying to you. So we'll boil it down to just one of two choices. You only have two. Door number one, I continue as I'm doing, being me. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because once you know who you are, you feel pretty invincible. No matter what anybody says, they can't change your notion of who you are. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to defend who you are. You just know. So you're not affected by people who tell you that you're something else. So, door number one, I continue like I'm doing, being me. I was hired to come here to be me, and I have a contract that you signed inviting me to come here to be me without any restrictions whatever on me being me. That's the first door. The second door is you can fire me. You have every right to do that. You can go out and tell 200 people that you're canceling the event. She started to speak. I said, "We're not discussing this anymore. The answer is one or two. When people are victims, there's nothing they like better than getting you involved in a war of words." She started to talk again. I said, "Then we'll make it even simpler. Are you going to go out and cancel the event? If you answer with anything other than yes, then I will assume your answer is no, and I will continue." She started to protest again. I said, "So, you're not canceling, and I will continue being myself." I know who I am. That doesn't mean who I am always performs perfectly. Don't care about that. But I know I'm not afraid of the disapproval of other people because I do know who I am. Their opinion doesn't change my belief in myself. And until that day arrives for us that we know who we are, disapproval will always frighten us and we'll never know who we are. I don't have on the recording device.
You're right. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Remember, we clapped.
We clapped.
And we're recording it in a new way.
So when you clap, everything goes better.
Mm-hmm.
I need to remember this. Here's a lady who wrote and said, I teach piano, and I have this one student whose mother claims that he has ADHD. Whether he does or not, who knows, but his mother says he does. The kid is in the 5th grade, and he's very difficult to teach. He seems to have a pretty good ear for music and is obviously smart, but he won't listen to a thing I say, which would tend to lead one to conclude that this kid is using his ADHD to hold everybody around him hostage. But hey, I don't know the kid, so we're just going to continue to assume he does. He argues with me and he finds reasons to not play. He's very disrespectful, gets angry a lot, pounds his fists on the piano keys even, and I'll ask him to put his hands in the proper position to begin again, but then he just starts talking about something else. When I finally get him to play a passage, it's even more difficult to get him to hear anything I have to say about how he could improve. Essentially, he listens to nothing for the entire half hour of the lesson, so we accomplish nothing. In other words, this kid is pretty much unteachable. I had the mother come in to the lesson last week, but it was hardly any better. He behaved just as badly because he has no respect for her either and just does what he wants. And she lets him. It's very clear to me that he has very little discipline and no love in his life. I wish I could just sit with him and talk to him and listen to him like he really needs, but I'm paid to do a job. So I was wondering what you would suggest. I also find myself being selfish and caring more about getting my job done than about his happiness and what's best for him. I have no idea how to get through to this kid and help him learn the piano while loving him. Any insight would be greatly appreciated. So there are some things you could try. You could read Real Love and Parenting to give you an idea what he's missing and to learn an overall approach to this kid, to learn what he needs. There are also innumerable examples in the book of how to say them to him. He needs loving and teaching. And right now you're pretty much only teaching him because, as you said yourself, that your job is to teach him, but it's always love and teach. He's not feeling your love, so he ignores you, partly because he doesn't feel your love and also because he's learned at home he doesn't have to listen to anybody. He ignores everybody who doesn't love him. And actually, if somebody were to start loving him now, he still wouldn't listen because it's become a habit and he pretty much just does what he wants to do. So you're going to have to go to extra lengths to demonstrate love to this kid, and that still might not work. So what could you do? You could, let's get specific. You stop teaching. You're right in the middle of a lesson, you just stop. You touch him, just touch his shoulder. Oh, you'll have his attention because I promise you nobody wants to touch this kid. Look him right in the eye, wait for him to look at you and say, I care about you more than I care about this stupid piano piece. That's not an accidental choice of words. This kid has probably never heard the words, I care more about you than fill in the blank, anything. And if you as his piano teacher refer to the piece as a stupid piano piece, oh, he's going to be enormously amused by that and be paying attention to you. So, and then say, and I think that you might enjoy playing this piece, but you need to know that I care about you. It's fun to play. Kids need a reason to play. You're going to learn how to play the piano. That's not a reason. That's just an annoyance. It's a burden. Make the piece sound fun. You play it for him. Play it with an exaggerated gusto. Um, Find a piece that sounds like a commercial on television. Anything that engages the kid's attention. And then say, now, let's do one measure. One measure. That's what depends on the piece. 2, 3, 4 beats that would last, what, 2 seconds? And keep trying until he plays one measure. The whole time it's about listening to him. So it's about loving him. Now, that's just one approach, one of 100. I'm just trying to show you that teaching a kid like this is possible. I've done it on many occasions. If it works, you keep doing things like that over and over, slowly increasing the teaching compared to the amount of loving and paying attention to him. Now, what if it doesn't work? What if he still listens to nothing? Because that's one of the possibilities, quite distinct actually. You have to decide whether what you're paid to teach this kid is worth putting up with the kid. Really. This kid marinates in a kind of parenting hell all week long. And out of 168 hours in the week, you have him for 30 minutes. So how realistic is it to expect that you would change his life against those odds? You actually might. If you're the only person who listens to him, miracles become possible. But you do get to be realistic here. So if the pay is worth it to you, you just keep calmly trying to teach him, even if it's absolutely futile. You just accept that you'll probably teach him very little. But if he's too aggravating, you get to drop him as a student. So the simple question is it worth it to you to put up with this? The piano teacher sent a second email and said, so is it acceptable morally to take money for teaching a kid if he's not learning anything? Actually, yes. Like you said, the mother has seen the kid in your lesson. The mother lives with the kid. The mother's probably thrilled to have 30 minutes without the child. Even 30 minutes out of 168 hours is probably the highlight of her week. So since the mother knows, you're not so much being paid to teach the piano, even though you think so. You're actually being paid to satisfy the employer, who is the mother. And if she knows what's happening, then absolutely it's morally okay for you to accept pay for what you do. New subject. I told a lady that whenever we talk, she argues. And I said, you argue pretty much with every sentence I speak. She wrote later, and she said, I hadn't noticed that I do that. Even when asking questions, but now it really makes sense to me. I've then been confused by how people respond to me when I thought I was just trying to ask something, but then looking back, it must have totally looked like I was trying to argue when that wasn't my intention. So what you told me helps a lot. You never know when somebody will be willing to listen. You're right. You learned to argue as a child to defend yourself. It's a reflex from childhood. And now you get to simply see that you do it. You don't need to feel bad about yourself. Just be aware of it. She writes, can you give me an example of how better to ask a question so that I don't come across like I'm trying to be defensive or attack? Or is it worth my literally writing on emails that I'm not trying, when I write to emails to people, is it worth saying in the email, I'm not trying to argue or be right, even if it comes across like that? Actually, that won't help you at all to say that you're not trying to argue, because sometimes you will be, and you won't know it. In fact, you can pretty much guarantee that somebody's going to criticize you if they say, now, I don't mean to criticize. What's their next word? But, and then they criticize you. Now, I'm not trying to find fault, but, and then they find fault. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but, and then they tell you what to do. So now I probably won't do any good if you're writing an email to somebody. Tell them you're not trying to argue, because then they're going to assume that you are. Just be aware of your tendency, and you'll get better. You will. If I see it in the future in your communications with me, I will point it out again, as I did this last time. Look at the difference that it made this last time when I told you that you argue all the time. You actually heard me. Then pick a couple of people in real love and ask them to point it out to you when you're arguing. You have to ask people who have the experience to point it out to you, and you have to pick people who would have the courage to do it, not friends who would be too weak or afraid to do it. In fact, you might even send me a few names and I can tell you whether they'd have the courage or not to tell you. Some people just can't do it. They'd be too afraid of you. In general, what's the difference then, because this will help you, between arguing and genuinely asking, which is what you think you're doing on those occasions when you're arguing. You even ask here, could you show me what you mean when you say that I, whatever, question or argue? If people say, but, that's almost always an argument. If you say to somebody, could you show me what you mean when you say blank, that's a question, and people like to be asked questions. If you say, could you help me understand something, that's a question. And if you say it with the right tone, especially if you're in person and even by email, can you help me understand? Help me is almost incompatible with arguing. It's almost impossible for somebody to argue and say, could you help me? It changes your whole mindset to say, could you help me? Because it acknowledges that you might be wrong. Makes it very hard to argue. When you say to people, well, now what I think, that's almost always an argument. So there, I've given you several examples of the difference between questions and arguing, and so that will help you understand the difference between the two, but you're going to really need some people to point it out to you in real time. This is a really important subject for you to get, because if you don't understand the difference, relationships are pretty tough. This is from a woman who's been in real love for years. She said, I'm inspired to share this with you. Real love has made such an enormous difference in my life, and it continues to. Despite continuing to have serious health problems with ongoing pain, I have such a great attitude toward it all. I have transformed my life, and I'm going to continue to do that. Thrilling. I'm glad you wrote. Picked up my whole day. You continue. I live and love the idea that you can be happy even if you're sick. Actually, the truth is you can be happy no matter what is happening around you. I agree. And this is about as profound as love gets. If you're happy when everything's going your way, well, that's not exactly a trick, is it? I'm happy because I won the lottery today and my cancer biopsy came back negative and all the people that I don't like died all in the same day. Well, that's no great trick. But if you genuinely feel loved, you genuinely feel happy, you feel loved and happy no matter what goes on around you. You continue. I'm consistently learning this and getting better at it over time. Just recently, a big problem occurred, and within the first few minutes of going into anxiety or fear, which I used to be in all the time, I said out loud to myself, I choose not to respond this way, not to believe the lie that my life is tied to the results of this thing. I can be happy, I'm safe, and I'm loved no matter what. And I stopped the fear right then. I was amazed. Well, me too. Since I know you and know how difficult this has been for you, it's a miracle. You did what it took to find real love, as we've talked about in every video chat forever. You did what it took to trust it, and to remember it when it was not immediately available to you. And you were able to chase away your fear by feeling loved. That's very powerful stuff. You continue, and I've changed so many other patterns like guilt and various fears and so on. I feel like I'm a walking example of real love. I love and teach others almost every day, just in the course of my regular activities. Now, don't get me wrong. I have my bad days, my struggles when I'm not feeling well, my victim-y times when I'm not feeling loved or loving. But they're less frequent. And baby, that's as good as life gets. We all have bad moments or days, but then we just see them and we keep learning. And the good times get more frequent and they last longer, and then they begin to merge together. And before long, you notice one day, and I get these letters from somebody every week, suddenly, overall, you're a happy person. And it all started with individual decisions like you made, which is, I'm not going to indulge this fear. It's those individual decisions that change your whole life. You say, I still have a ways to go. I think often about the love that I'm getting from lots of people in real love on the video chats and so on. I remember the real love principles and try to live them each day. I am so grateful. And I'm grateful for you. When anybody is grateful and happy and feels loved and is loving, my life is happier as a result of their being in it. My life is happier as a result of you being in my life. Love's a powerful thing. Here's somebody who says, I have a really hard time distinguishing within myself between having expectations of my husband and asking for what I need. Needing something is having expectations for the other person to fulfill them, kind of, isn't it? It's really not so much about the need. You can simply want something you need. You need air. You want air. It's an expectation when you'd be disappointed in demanding it from a particular person or in a certain way. So everybody needs air, that's acceptable. But if you're down scuba diving and you insist on ripping the regulator out of another diver's mouth to breathe their air, that would be an unacceptable expectation. So there is an exception to what I just said about being disappointed if somebody doesn't do something. If I agree to do something, then you have a right to have an expectation. It's kind of obvious, or why would you have agreements? If I pay you $10 for something, then I expect to get $10 worth of whatever it is I paid for. But even when there's an agreement, it's still wrong to get irritated. What is appropriate with an agreement is accountability. I will hold you accountable for what you agreed to do. And that is what you can do with your husband. Where things get messy for you is that when you married him, he agreed to be a partner and to do a whole lot of things he had no idea he was agreeing to do. When he got married, he probably never would have gotten married. He throws his little fits about stuff solely because he's selfish and he wants you to back off from holding him accountable. You say, and if he then throws a fit and continues to be selfish, I'm supposed to keep bringing up the subjects until they get resolved? Is that right? You do get to hold him accountable. You get to hold him responsible for his obligation, even if he doesn't like it. Now, I'm not saying every time, but if you don't do it every time, you take the risk of him saying, because I've seen this many times, people who are irresponsible, and then you hold them accountable, but you only hold them accountable 50% of the time. Oddly, irresponsible people will then say, well, how can you claim you want me to do that? You don't say anything the other half of the time when I don't do it. So with irresponsible people, you pretty much have to hold them accountable every single time. Where you two often make mistakes is in being clear who is responsible for what. So when he's not working, like on a weekend, do you share diaper changing? You don't make that clear, so you have arguments about it all the time. Who cleans the kitchen and does the other chores? That all needs to be agreed upon clearly, if necessary, in writing and stuck up on the fridge so everybody can see it. You ask, isn't that having expectations for him to change? Yeah, and with an agreement, that's okay, because he agreed to be your partner, which doesn't mean that on weekends, after he's worked all week and you worked all week taking care of 3 little kids, that he gets to sit on his butt and watch football while you take care of the kids, so that you're essentially working 7 days a week and he's working 5. You said, anyway, I worked really hard not to force him to do things, something he used to always say that I did to him. He said that I coveted his attention, time, affection, blah, blah, blah. So I worked to get rid of any expectations I had of him. Wrong. He's tricked you by using a word that you don't like into letting him be selfish and lazy. He's used guilt and intimidation and obligation to get you to back off, and that's what victims do. Victims are masters at getting you to back off when they're actually responsible. You said, I finally did get to that place. The thing is, it turned into, I can't expect anything from you, so I might as well not need you. I don't need you. And through that, I feel like I lost respect and attraction for him. Yeah, hence everything that I said above. Being partners is a difficult thing to learn if you've never seen it before. He's tricked you into believing that you're partners if he shares his paycheck with you, but that you have to do all the other work. He's tricked you, he's deceived you. You need to read the parenting and marriage books again with him out loud and make sure that he understands them. You say, so tonight I brought up some things that have been on my heart, feeling like he wasn't willing to have discussions about him changing and feeling afraid to bring stuff up. As soon as you start a discussion with fear, you're doomed. He has his little fits, his little temper tantrums, solely to make you back off and feel bad and let him be selfish. Wrong. He says he wants to be a better person, but then he resists any efforts made in that direction. So you've really got to learn to hold him accountable and not feel guilty or afraid or bad about having these discussions where the two of you learn to be partners. As I said, read the parenting book, read the marriage book, follow the principles. Anytime you have a question, you tell him, I'd be thrilled to have a Skype call with him and you and me. My guess would be that he would be more likely to do what you ask him to do immediately rather than face me. Here's somebody who says, I'm helping a young couple who are on a road trip. They have a 3-month-old baby. So they're going on the road trip and I'm taking care of the 3-month-old. It has all the basics done before they get in the car. Fed, clean, dry, warm, etc. But he just wails and wails and wails while he's in the back seat when the car is moving. At 3 months, a child only knows that it is separated from its parents, separated from you, confined, and it's noisy, and he's afraid. That's all 3-month-old children know. They don't reason. They're not being bratty. I can't tell you how many adults I've heard refer to a 3-month-old child who's hungry and tired as bratty. No, they're being 3 months old and afraid. However, I can tell you that if parents are loving toward each other and the child consistently from birth, this howling happens much less. All pain and fear are cumulative. So I can tell you from considerable experience that if a child is raised with love, they can put up with other changes much more easily, like a lot. You continue. I heard you talk once about squirting, arguing children with a water pistol once. I remember that discussion too. I'm guessing this is not quite right for a 3-month-old. Any other suggestions? So, first, about the water pistol. I've regretted using that example more than once. You only do this with older kids who are not paying attention. Older kids, like at the very least a year old, where they can understand. And usually when they're fighting with each other, not when they're wailing because they're tired and hungry. And you only do it if you can do it lovingly. You've instructed, you've loved over and over, and finally the two kids are fighting and they're not paying attention. So you just level a Annie Oakley style water pistol over your shoulder and you just squirt them in the face till they quit. It's astonishingly effective because it turns out they don't like it. Or you can pull over and you can talk to them about it. Now, it's a different subject for a 3-month-old. For a 3-month-old, you do not squirt them in the face with a water pistol. One parent, so let's imagine you've got two parents. One parent needs to periodically go in the back seat and touch the child. So pull the car over, one parent goes in the back seat and just sits with the child for a little while. Use a pacifier. I think they call them soothers in Canada or dummies in England, but it's that little rubber thing you stick in their mouth. It just helps calm them down. You talk to the kid, you sing, you read stories, whatever. Then you pull over, you pull off the road again, and the parent who's in the back seat tries sitting in the front seat again. You may have to go back and forth. You practice doing whatever it takes. At 3 months, they get all kinds of allowances because the world is a scary place. And you might have to just sit back there with a child who's 3 months old. They're afraid. You can't reason with a child who's 3 months old. This is from a lady in Australia who has simply been reading the Real Love books and emailing people in the United States to just connect with them. She started reading the books and said, "What can I do?" And I said, "Well, write some people in the United States." She did. She's had no personal contact with them, and yet in just weeks, she writes and she tells me this. She says, "I used to stress out so much if I was running late for work. I had to wait for Ben to come home to use his car because, I guess that's her older son, because the water pump in my car was leaking like a tap, and I was going to be about 15 minutes late. I couldn't do anything about it. So I just decided, as I read in one of the books, why worry? Why stress? Why lose my happiness over a water pump? So I just messaged my work partner and sat on the couch and relaxed until my son got home and I got to use his car. I have never reacted this way to stress before in my life." I'm amazed. When we feel loved, when we don't feel alone, so many other things just don't matter anymore. You continue. "When I got to work, I didn't endlessly apologize, which I always would have done in the past. I didn't even feel bad. When Ben got home, he said, 'Oh, sorry for, making me late.' I said, 'Don't worry about it. I don't get stressed out anymore, and I told you I don't want you to rush when you're driving.' In the past, I would have worried, freaked out, actually, about any little thing that went wrong with the car. We don't have public transport where we live. It didn't bother me in the slightest. It was one miracle after another. and all in one day. I'm so grateful. Can you believe it's only been about 10 days since I came across the reallove.com website? Honey, you're a miracle. Very unusual. You're simply trusting. You have an inner gift for recognizing the truth and for trusting it. Stunning. And that's why this is working, because you're feeling the love, not just reading about it. That's impressive. You say, my oldest son will be putting a new water pump in this weekend. I hope I can rub some real love onto him because I hardly ever have a chance to see him or talk to him. He only comes home to sleep usually. I also seem to have a permanent smile on my face these days. And for the first time in years, I sleep really well. I haven't had a good night's sleep in a very long time. Love is miraculous. You keep feeling loved, your children will feel it, and it will change your entire family. Now, here's an example of somebody from Australia who did exactly what she was told to do. She just did it instead of arguing about it or coming up with the 20 reasons why she couldn't. She found love, she trusted it, she remembered it, and already she's finding opportunities to share it with the people around her, and it's changing her and her entire family. Works that way for all of us. We'll see you in a week.